This is the Healing Project Wellness Series, and I'm your host, Carolyn Jones. Well, we're going to continue this episode of the Healing Project Wellness Series with generational wisdom, tilling ancestral soil. I started thinking about the fact that my mother grew up in a family of sharecroppers. And up until now, the word has had a negative connotation for me. But it came to my mind that a sharecropper wasn't just a tenant farmer who gives a part of each crop as rent. They had skills. They were agriculturalists. They planted seeds, tended the land, and harvested the land. So they helped everybody live. In my research, and earlier in this session, I read an excerpt from Bullwhip Days, and I chose this one for this part of the session. Bullwhip Days is a book that has slave narratives. And I was looking for where slaves used herbs to heal themselves. Because as was mentioned in part one, that you will see as well when we finish with our edit. Harriet Tubman was a forager. She had to keep everybody alive while she was helping them escape. So she was an herbalist as well, but we don't hear about that. They don't talk about that. We don't talk about that. So let me read this excerpt from Bullwhip Days to you. When we got sick, and by the way, this is a slave named Polly Shine. When we got sick, we had the best of care. Massa would get us a Negro mama, and she doctored us from herbs she got out of the woods for coughs and colds. She used turpentine gathered from pine trees, honey and onions made into a syrup mixed together. Then she used red oak, cami weed, and Jerusalem weeds for fever, chills, and malaria. If we did not get better in a hurry, Massa would get the white doctor. Of course, us Negroes soon learned to play sick lots of times to get out of work, and Massa would let us off until we got better, because if we got worse and died, he would lose some money. If Massa caught on to us making out like we were sick, he would sure give us a hard punishment, but we would be very careful not to let him catch us. We knew that old Black Mama would not tell on us, and if we thought that Massa was going to get the white doctor, we got better right away. It was very seldom that Massa ever caught up with us. Two more slaves, Betty Powers and Alex McKinney, had this to say. Here's Betty. But 'twarn't enough for the heavy eaters. We uns all have to be real careful. And then some of the folks goes hungry sometimes. The massa gives we uns meat, cornmeal, lasses, taters, peas, beans, milk, and weans get white flour on Sunday morning, just enough for to make one batch of biscuits. The short rations cause lots of trouble because the niggas have to steal food. 'Twas a whipping if they gets catched. The colored folks am in a hell of a fix if they can't do what the work because they weak, even if they hungry. 'Twas a whipping then for sure. If they steal the food so they stay strong and can do the task, 'twas a whipping. So there 'twas. Most of them steals and tooks a whipping if they catched and on a full stomach. My folks don't have to steal food, but we am careful. You can just bet 'twarn't nothing wasted. Alex went there with this. I recollect seeing one biscuit crust one morning. They throwed it out to the dogs and I beat the dog to it. So it gives you some idea of the pain and suffering, but also the unity in the process of surviving and trying to thrive at least. So before we move on, let's take a moment. I know thoughts of slavery and those scenes and words can bring up trauma that is already buried in our DNA. Let's take a moment to take a deep breath. Close your eyes and say to yourself, I am. And enjoy the amness of it all, the divinity in you. My name is Carolyn Mary Jones. On my birth certificate, it says Caroline. When I researched my DNA, I found out I was of the mitochondrial haplogroup L1, which is commonly found in Central Africa and West Africa. While I worked at Medgar Evers College, I met a professor named Dr. Doris Withers, and she was supervising the National Geographic DNA testing for us. And that's where I found this information out. And I was more than delighted. Believe me, I don't know what all of these terms mean, and I'm still researching and delving into it. But I was thrilled when I found out that the haplogroup that I'm representing is the most ancestral mitochondrial lineage of all currently living modern humans, also dubbed mitochondrial Eve. And I'll be looking forward to finding out more of what that means for my life. The countries that I may have originated, my ancestors may have originated from, are all listed here, in Central Africa and in West Africa. I look forward to finding out which one specifically. These are the pictures of my grandparents. I never met them because they died when my mother was 16. Willie Jones Sr. and Lizzie Elder Jones. Wouldn't they, the agriculturalists, be interested to learn that their DNA created an herbalist? This is their oldest child and their youngest child, the oldest being Uncle Willie Henry Jones II, and my mother, Mattie Bell Jones Dupree, and that's me as a baby. That's baby Carolyn. I pulled out the family Bible that my mother was very intent about keeping, and that is her handwriting, where she records the name of her father and her mother and her brothers and sisters. Willie Jones became the oldest sibling because Herman Jones died. And so then there were 5 left, 2 girls and 3 boys. Elma Clyde Jones, Jesse Roy Jones, Blanche Mae Jones, and Maddie Bell Jones. They were born in Watkinsville, Georgia, and grew up in Athens. So some years ago, one of my cousins from Cousin Willie Mae's family let me know that I had a cousin in Hawaii. I said, bet. Always want to know more about my family and certainly want to visit Hawaii. You know, that's a nice little package. And his name was Dr. Donald Thomas. She told me that he was a Guinness World Record holder. And that made me even more excited. So in 2015, I finally got to the Big Island. I had been going to Oahu before then. And boy, it was a wonderful experience. It's a very spiritual island. And Donald and his wife, Pam, and their 3 dogs welcomed me with open hearts and open arms. So Donald took me on a jaunt with him to St. Joseph's Elementary School. And I got to see him at work as the king of new jump swing. And he promotes healthy aging. And we all should be interested in that. It's one thing to stay alive. It's another thing to enjoy your elder years, your winter years. And he'll tell you more about himself and how he came about winning the Guinness Book of Records awards. But I also want to point out that he gave the longest sermon on divine nutrition. And he is also a spokesman for American Heart Association in Maui. His publications are The Philosophy of Divine Nutrition. He was thinking about divine nutrition all the way back in '77 when we were snuffing down all kinds of things. I know I had some burgers and milkshakes. Oh, I was going to town. The Philosophy of Divine Nutrition was his first book. The Way of PDN, the Ultimate Vegetarian Athletic Nutrition Program. Donald, I've changed my evil ways. And New Jump Swing, Healthy Aging and Athletic Nutrition Program was released in 2020. What I find most interesting is that at 12 years of age, he developed Osgood Schlatter disease, a very painful knee condition. But by becoming a vegetarian and dedicating himself to the development of a jump rope cross-training fitness program, he rehabilitated himself from knee disease, knee surgery, and a respiratory disease. So with that, I would like to introduce all of you to my beloved cousin, Dr. Donald Thomas. Thank you so much for being with us today, Donald.
Aloha, and thank you so much for having me.
Yes.
Well, you know, you've really covered a lot. And so I can kind of go back when you see to my grandfather and grandmother. When I was much younger, I can say I started in Brooklyn and I started in Bedford-Stuyvesant. And then my parents bought a home in Brownsville when I was approximately 6 or 7 years of age. Mm-hmm. In the early days, my mother would take me down south. Lynchburg, South Carolina is where she was born. And that's that picture of my grandfather and grandmother That's in Lynchburg. The donkey's name is Hattie. That was a mule. That was a family mule. And the point of that is that my grandfather is A.K. Hilton. His actual first name is A.K. It doesn't stand for anything. That's the name. He was considered one of the most successful farmers back in that time, and he was a sharecropper. And another picture that I'll show you of one of his sons, even his son said he was a modern day slave on many levels. There was a woman, Miss McAveen. She owned most of Lynchburg, South Carolina. But because of his success growing soybeans and potatoes and eggplant and all the other things, I remember going down there. He had a pretty good life because of his success. But I always had exposure to fresh fruits and vegetables because my mother, coming up in that sort of a lifestyle, was a big promoter of salads. I remember still in Bedford-Stuyvesant having salad with lettuce and shredded carrots and raisins and things of that nature. So of course, back in those days, I also ate pork chops and ham and everything else. As a matter of fact, one of the big highlights of me going down south was that during the Christmas time, they would make chitlins, and my mother would dip it in egg batter. Fried chitlins dipped in egg batter. Oh man, that was some good eating.
Were they good, Donald?
Oh yes, oh yes.
I could never get past the
smell.
Yes.
Yeah. Oh well, they cleaned it for half a day. They cleaned those chitlins for a good half a day. But as I say, that was like a highlight during the Christmas time for me when we go down there. Those fried chitlins dipped in egg batter.
What? So, I never heard of that. My thing was smothered pork chops. I'm going to tell you that.
Okay, well, I had that too. So, I never tell people I didn't eat meat. I ate just about everything.
Yeah.
But so that was Lynchburg, South Carolina, with my grandfather and grandmother. I never actually met the grandmother. She had passed away before I met her. And I'm sure that's one of my uncles down there underneath the donkey, but I'm not quite sure which one. On the other side, of course, is my mother and father in the middle. The man next to my father is her brother, Uncle Bill, Willie Thomas. And I'm pretty much sure that was my grandmother on the side of my mother. And that was their wedding. And I want to say that was sometime in the 1920s.
It's gorgeous.
The picture right there in the middle, I am listed in the 1989 Guinness Book of World Records, and that picture is in the Guinness Book of Records with me. And in the name of promotion, if you look right down there at that podium, you'll see the book, The Way of PDN. That book is what I used to do the record. And so I made my books world records unto themselves. When somebody says, what did you talk about for 93 hours? The book, The Philosophy of Divine Nutrition, is the sermon. What did you talk about for the 2 after dinner speech records? The book, The Way of PDN, is the actual speech. So
well, would you tell our viewers, not to interrupt you, but would you tell our viewers how it led up to that? Like with Lloyd and all of that? Oh,
sure. So as again, growing up, at the age of 12, I developed a knee disease, but I was still very active. My nickname was Spiderman since I was about 12 or 13 years of age because of all of the running and jumping that I used to do. And but I would tell people, I even say to my mother, my knees hurt. And as a 12-year-old child, I'd rub down every night with Bengay, and I'd slip and take children aspirin and everything else because my knees would hurt. But it didn't stop me from doing all of the playing. My father used to work for Jack Frost Sugar Refinery, and whenever I ate cereal, I will always remember a large amount of sugar still at the bottom of the bowl after I finished eating the cereal and so on. As I got a little bit older, every winter I would have sinusitis to the point where I would wind up almost living off of nose sprays. Anytime after September, October, seemed like my nose would just close up. And at some point in time, I was always interested in science, and I began to read things about nutrition. And I started reading things about dairy and African Americans and other people of color, started reading things about sugar. And of course, I'm 13, 14 years old, and I've got knees like a senior citizen, which also made me interested in geriatrics, because here I was as a child, having some of the same pains that a much older person would have. And so all of those things kind of brought me into more and more health and nutrition. When I started working right out of high school, I worked at Kingsborough Psychiatric Center, and I worked on the geriatrics ward. As a matter of fact, I and two other gentlemen were the first two men to ever work with women on the in the psychiatric unit. And I was exposed through the psychiatrist. He started making us aware of B complex vitamins that were recognized as being good to ward off things like dementia. And we had some people on the wards who had eating disorders, and so they would make a bread that had all of the nutrition in the bread, so that even a person that had poor nutrition would be able to get the better nutrition. So geriatric nutrition, these were things that I was exposed to at a pretty young age.
And you were being molded for who you are today.
Who I am today. At 16, I started studying martial arts with an African-American sensei by the name of Professor Cleophas Jacobs. And he even had some write-ups. They referred to him as the ghetto sensei. Well, he was the first one who exposed me to, after every training session, he would drink various herb teas. And that was my introduction into herbs as a part of fitness. Once I graduated high school, one day I was going to a party up in Harlem and the place was closed. And as I was walking down, I ran into the Tree of Life. It was closed at that time, but I looked in the window and I saw all of these books on nutrition and herbs and martial arts philosophy, Eastern philosophy. And that next day I went to the store. And before I got in the store, I heard a voice. And that was the voice of a man by the name of Dr. John Moore. And Dr. Moore was an herbalist. He come from the old South and the old Southern tradition of the herbal and the herbal cares and treatments. Dr. Moore, and you sent me something, Dr. Moore would take you to any park in New York and tell you everything in there, what you could use the leaves for, what you could use the bark for, the roots for, you name it. The man had a 4th grade education, but he so inspired me because despite his lack, he was committed to his study. The man knew herbs like you would know the back of your hand. And that was always inspiring to me because here I was going to City College on 137th, and I would sit down and listen to the professors. And I would go down to Harlem to that Tree of Life. And I knew when it came to a mastery of his subject matter, Dr. Moore had just as much of a mastery of his subject matter as any PhD up there at City College. And I said to myself, well, if this man could take so little and go so far, I have no excuse.
That's right.
I was always reading something called the Vegetarian Times. Newspaper first, it was a newspaper, then it became a magazine.
I remember that publication.
Vegetarian Times had several issues about people who were promoting vegetarianism, not only for health, but for athletic fitness. That also put me on the path of where I'm coming from today. And so one day I went up to the Grand Army Plaza Library and I spoke to the librarian and I said, well, what's the deal with this Guinness book? And he explained to me that the Guinness book was considered a reference book. You couldn't take it out of the library. And anything in that Guinness book, even if it was a silly record, you had to have enough proof that you did it, that it could stand up in a court of law. So from that, I said, okay, well, this might be a path that I could take. Again, I'm a kid from a dead-end street in Brownsville. I don't have any money to advertise or promote, but I have my talent and ability. And one thing led to the other. And that's how I wound up saying, okay, when I spoke to people like Lloyd Strayhorn, I spoke to people like Kanya, who was the owner of the Tree of Life, and of course, Dr. Moore. And we looked and we said, well, you know, you think you might be able to do a record where you could read your book. And I looked in again this book and there was no record for just reading. But since part of the Tree of Life's graduation process was becoming ordained, then I said, okay, I could do this record as a sermon record and use my thesis as the sermon. This way I'm establishing the thesis, I'm establishing myself. I talked to Lloyd Strayhorn, I spoke to Kanye, I said, okay, I want to do this record at the Tree of Life and I would like to present as many of the ideas that the Tree of Life is promoting as possible. So that's where I spoke to Lloyd as far as, okay, I'm going for a record. A record is a number. What would you say is the best number?
Oh, that's
I'm going for this record. What would you say, Kanya? What would you say is the best days based upon the moon or the stars or whatever else? Now, as I always explain to people, numbers don't break the record, I break the record. Yeah. But the fact that you could use anything, an athlete is always looking for an edge. And so if numerology is an edge, if the stars are an edge, all well and good.
You're absolutely right. I have taken up the practice of doing meditation, like actually hired somebody to do meditation with me on the full moon, on the new moon, because my focus is manifestation.
Right.
And it really works.
Sure.
It works.
Sure. Mm-hmm. And so, so the point was that by using as many of the concepts of the tree of life, I got a 5-minute rest break after every completed hour. There was a good brother by the name of Brother Joseph Pollock. He was going to school for acupuncture and acupressure. And so during those 5-minute rest breaks, he would give me various acupressure massages. I started on Monday, September 18th, and I finished on Friday, September 22nd.
My God.
You are given a 5-minute rest after every completed hour.
Now, were you allowed to eat or
whatever
drink?
You have to do in those 5 minutes, that's what you do.
Mm-hmm. And what did you drink during those 5 minutes?
During those 5 minutes, that's where Dr. Moore would give me the different herbs, the various honeys for the throat. You see, again, we were demonstrating what you could use for more energy other than a drug.
And taking care of your throat chakra.
At the same time. At the same time. Not only did I demonstrate what could be used for energy, you're listening to one of the world's longest talkers. I don't need a microphone up to my voice box for you to hear me. I can still talk long and strong. All of that was based upon what I was using. So it wasn't about magic. It wasn't anything mystical. These were different herbs and different practices. That it's one thing to read a book and says, this diet will give you more energy. It's another thing to read that book long enough to break a world record.
Yes.
Getting that same information.
That's right. That's right.
Seeing is believing. And you were talking about we have to not only be healthy, and I make you laugh. I said the first night that I did that record, the Tree of Life had eaves. And so I was outside, but I was under the eaves because it was raining. And as about 2 o'clock in the morning, I got ready to pull one of the books that I was reading. And the book was, Can You Live to Be 100? And I looked up and I said, Lord, you've given me such a challenge. Not only do I have to convince them that they can live a long life, I have to convince them that life is worth living.
Yes.
Okay.
That's right.
Minority health disparities is so much based upon how do the people feel about themselves. Right. You'll never hear a rich person say, got to die from something. Rich people want to live forever because they feel they have something to live for. How do we convince the people of color, that not life is worth living?
Yes.
Okay. So that was another part of even what I do now as a life coach. Everybody has skills. They have talents and ability. If you focus on those skills, talents, and abilities, that's what makes your life worth living, because you will be fulfilling yourself. You have a purpose. Everyone has a purpose on this life. But until you find that purpose, you just go to a job 5 days a week. It's not your purpose. It's just a job.
Yeah.
Once you can find your purpose, then you're on the path.
Yes. And I know that those seeds were planted in you from this beautiful woman that I'm looking at, Mom. And I'd like to hear a little bit about her as we're talking about tilling this ancestral soil. What came from her that she planted in you that made you who you are today? And who is Aunt Carrie and Aunt Marie and Joe? Okay,
well, if you see Mom and Joe, so Mom is Mom and Joe is my Uncle Joe. That's her youngest brother. And both of them, of course, are very, here's another one I laugh. When I did the sermon record, it was my mother who paid for the book, The Philosophy of Divine Nutrition. That book cost $5,000 for 4,500 copies. And a year or so after I broke the record, my mother came to Hawaii and we were talking and she said, son, when you came to me and asked me for the money for that book, I spoke to some family members and some friends, and some of them told me not to do it. I'm so glad I didn't listen to them. And I looked at my mother and I said, Ma, here I am, a young man from Brownsville who did something clean, intelligent, beneficial to society and to my community. how sad anyone would tell you not to support something like that.
That's right.
One of the things about my mother is that she always believed in improving yourself. Neither my mother nor father had a high school diploma or GED. And for a significant amount of time, she worked at what would be considered a sweatshop. It just so happened that that sweatshop was over a Barnes and Noble's used bookstore. 3 out of 5 days a week, I got some kind of book, some kind of educational material. Anything that I wanted to study in terms of academics, she supported it. Yeah. And when I broke the Guinness record, I thanked her by saying, Bruce Lee was great, but it was Bruce Lee's mother who paid for his martial arts lessons. And that's the truth. and so she paid for that book because she saw the value of what I was trying to do. Now, something that even my friend—
And she loved her son.
And she loved her son, but you can love your son. I would say to you something like this. If I was a rapper and I was standing up there using derogatory terms towards women or towards my race, my mother would not support it.
Yes,
I know that.
And she was still loving you, but she
would still love me, but she would not support that. For me to stand up there and use any kind of derogatory terms towards women, my mother, she would say, I'm happy for your success, but that's something I can't abide by. Okay. So she had her principles. And one time I was watching TV and I said, oh, I hate that. She said, oh, you don't ever use that word in this house. You don't use the word hate in this house. Those are the sort of principles that she had. That doesn't mean you let people abuse you, but you don't hate anyone. So that was the sort of atmosphere that I came up under. Now,
that's so interesting. I just want to interject that that your mother said that to you, and my mother used to tell me about the sharecropping days and then tell me afterwards, but I don't want you to hate anyone. I want you to treat people the way they treat you. So it's just interesting how our homes crisscrossed in philosophy, and we didn't know each other at all.
As I like to tell people, hate is the nutrition of the devil. You don't feed the devil a crumb, not a crumb. Okay. The ladies on that other side, of course, that's little old me, and that's my mother.
That's that cute baby.
That's the cute little baby. The lady right in back of my mother with the glasses, that's my Aunt Carrie. And the other lady, that's my Aunt Marie. They were 2 sisters. And my Aunt Marie, when I lived on Macon Street in Bedford-Stuyvesant, I lived on the 2nd floor with my parents, and Aunt Marie and her husband, Uncle Johnny, they lived on the 1st floor. And so we kind of grew up together. And I don't know I think that's Bunny and her sister. I'm almost sure now that's another cousins of mine. Now that I'm talking about it, I think that's who they are. But,
just as beautiful as they can be.
Yes, they are. So, as I said, from the earliest days, the things about fruits and vegetables, my mother would always talk about it. They would comment about how the vegetables was not as fresh as what they used to eat down south. So, they would have talks, and all the family would meet together. And this is some of the family that even when we had the house on Amboy Street, they would meet and they would talk about the South, and they would talk about farming and talk about how they used to grow things and all of that. So I was exposed to that, even though I was a city kid. I would always hear about how the vegetables were so much fresher back in the South and things of that nature. The people in that picture, very quickly, the gentleman behind the steering wheel, Frank Hilton, he just passed away about 2 months ago in his 90s. And he was doing push-ups a week before he passed away. He was still able to do push-ups. He was in the military. He was a lifetime military man. And so he kept himself in good shape. The person in back of him, that's my uncle again, Uncle Bill. I call until the day he died. He always used to make comment of the fact, he said, I don't care how old you get, you always call me Uncle Bill. And, so, and then of course, in back of him was my mother. And then sitting next to my mother is my cousin Abraham. And Abraham was one of my babysitters. My father worked 4 to 12 shift, and my mother worked in the day. And there was a few hours that there was nobody with me. And Abraham was one of the cousins that used to stay with me during that time. One of my favorites.
Yes, I love that shot. It is.
Yeah, isn't that something? That's really classic.
I'm loving the car too.
Yes.
Got that gangster lean going.
Oh, yeah.
Now,
And this
this
is the
is
man
Dr.
that
John Moore, who you spoke about.
this is the man that inspired me. Now, this picture was taken about an hour after the 93-hour record. So this picture was taken September 22nd, 1978. And after we had finished, and as I always say to people, I had a 5-minute rest break after every completed hour. Dr. Moore was there every 5-minute break from Monday to Friday. And so that is a man that I can never say enough about.
Yes, I found that very interesting that he worked with the Black midwives of the area.
Oh, yeah.
Oh,
yeah.
And in the video that I sent you, he was talking about what's good for women and stuff like that.
Sure. Like I said, now this is back in the 70s. And so that just shows you, this knowledge, even among Black people, this knowledge has been out there for quite some time. And as you're saying, not everyone, if you think of yourself, if I came to you in 1975 and told you about not eating fried chicken and pork, you'd look at me like I was a man in the moon.
Said, move out my way. I'm gonna need that pork chop sandwich.
Thank you. Okay. So, it just shows you how knowledge has increased over time. One of the main points that I was doing during that world record is now referred to as minority health disparities. I had a leaflet during the time of that record in which it said, cancer will kill 121 Black people today. African-American women have some of the highest rates of diabetes. These were things that were known even in the 70s, but it wasn't being promoted. And so, that's one of the main
dribs and drabs. So it's
dribs
like,
and drabs.
Yeah, okay,
You had to kind of be into that particular sort of study to know about the impact of heart disease on Black people or cancer. You had to kind of be specific into it. But
it sounded like a foreign language.
Literally. Yeah. Because, listen, at the end of the day, people are going to keep on doing what they're doing until they can't do it any longer.
Until today.
Until they can't do it any longer, and you get ill, you take a pill. But the idea of doing things to prevent getting ill in the first place, that's something that's just now being recognized as being just as practical, if not more practical, than waiting until you get it to try to get rid of it.
That's right. Now, one of our cousins is on, Dolores Jones Danner. That's Uncle Willie's youngest daughter.
Okay.
And she just put in chat that her parents taught her the same thing about the word hate.
That's right. You don't hate. You don't hate.
So that seemed to be a family philosophy for us, which is very spiritually grounding, and it keeps your soul clear.
Exactly. Any way you look at it, hate is a cancer.
Yes.
And that'll eat you up. You look at some of the people who are obviously haters. You can look at their face and see what's going on with them. That hate is a cancer.
Yes. So, so many questions are colliding in my head as we talk, because you brought up so many wonderful points. And one of the main ones being, what are you doing now?
Okay. Well, I'm.
What are you up to?
Yeah. Okay. What am I up to? Well, in 2019, after 10 years of being a Social Security disability advocate with the Legal Aid Society of Hawaii, I officially retired, semi-retired, if you will. But those 10 years as a disability advocate, again, it really made me aware of you appreciate every day that you have. Right. For 10 years, I represented people much younger than me who had all sorts of disabilities. And so it just emphasized to me, as I say to people, don't work hard all your life to wind up giving the money to the doctor and the pharmacist, because you've given all to that job and now you're burnt out and spent out, and you can't do anything but go to the doctor, the pharmacist, church, and to the supermarket, and that's your whole life. One of the things that I had planned to do after I retired was get involved in life coaching. And this was 2019, when I retired in September of 2019, just before COVID came into play. And I had always intended to do things online with consultation.
Yeah.
So I'm working with a young brother out of Texas that's helping me set up my complete online consultation service, which will include nutrition and, of course, Social Security advocacy and life coaching in general. And of course, fitness. Always have to keep that fitness in there. So that's what I've been doing. There's an interesting, and it shows you, I didn't hear his speech at the time. There's a speech of Dr. Moore in which at some point, Dr. Moore says, if you want to get into selling something, sell comic books. And it just so happened that many years ago, I was working with a brother who came from Ohio who worked for IBM. And long story short, he suffered with depression. And when I met him, he had a suicide attempt.
Wow.
And I worked with him. He knew my mother, he knew the wife. And unfortunately, on his third attempt, he did it. And he left a video legacy. And he left me over 20,000 comic books. And with those comic books, I have started an online comic book store. And while you and I were talking, you heard something go ka-ching. That was one of the books that sold on eBay.
Well, hallelujah. We like abundance.
Hey, but the idea is that anything that you can do that brings you a certain amount of happiness, a certain amount of joy, while you are working on that job, now is the time to start thinking about what are you going to do for retirement.
That's right.
You see, that's part of your life goals. Not only do you want to be successful on the job, there's life after the job.
That's right.
And hopefully you have the energy and you have the wherewithal to follow up with all of the things that you've been putting off because you had to make the rent that week or that month. Yeah, but now you can do things that you enjoy. So this is another part of what as part of my life coaching is, what do you do with your life? Now that you're retired, there's life after retirement. What do you do? And so that's what is part of the things that I do.
That's so wonderful. Well, you know what? I don't want to be selfish because, I love talking to you. What I would like everyone to do is unmute themselves now and introduce yourself to Donald and make any statements, comments, or ask any questions you would like at this time.
Aloha to everyone.
Aloha.
Aloha.
Yes, well, first of all, it's nice to meet you, Donald. You're my namesake.
That's right.
And the interesting thing about meeting you today is that you resonate in many of the things that you spoke about. In particular, the last part of your presentation about who you are and what you're doing in this day and time. Ironically, I'm not retired, I'm semi-retired, but it seems like I'm probably never going to fully retire because of the work that I do. I'm an independent Medicare broker. And part of what I do is I educate seniors about wellness and health and preventive measures. And at the same time, how do they fulfill and have a quality of life? Because as you pointed out, it's not just about, we arrived at a certain point in our life. What do we do to continue to live and have a quality of life? Because this is not the end. In fact, I find it to be very rewarding when you can find a purpose by which you can give and have love and not hate, and also help people to lift them rather than try to step on them. Because as we know, love is the key to life. And when you can find a purpose, it gives you purpose. And I sleep well at night because of what I do.
Exactly.
And the irony of it is that when you point out the health benefits of what we eat, what we put in our bodies, unfortunately, we are learning this later in life. Because as a kid coming up, I grew up in Brooklyn as well. And I indicated to Carolyn at one point, when it came to eating, my mom, I'm the oldest of 5. And she would catch the fruit man, the vegetable man, the fish man, the meat man every other day. And we ate fresh. So therefore, we didn't have a lot of the ailments coming up as a kid. I was never a sickly kid, thank God. But as I got older, I started to deal with issues such as diabetes, high blood pressure. And these type of things are things that happen over time. And
Right.
if you don't change your habits, you know, they will catch up with you. I was an athlete. All right. I came up, I played every sport you can think of. But as you start to get an age in your life, you have to make adjustments too. But if you don't know it's not so much as what you're eating is what's eating you.
Very
It's
true.
very clear. In fact, of a lot of the things that we do as habit forming, and we don't realize it's really hurting us. So, I mean, it's just so much. I mean, you really have expounded on a lot of your life experiences and what you're giving to people, and I commend you for that. And I'm going to tune into your online life coaching because I think that's so important. And it doesn't matter what age you are. It just matters you make up your mind to say, let me go this direction. If you're finding yourself, you know, running into ailments and depression and so forth and so on. There's just so many ills of the world. But God didn't intend us to how would you say, get the worst part of life. He intends you to get the abundance of what life can offer you. And unfortunately, as you're pointing out with education, we don't always get it in a formal way. So even those who do find themselves stumbling across something that may be beneficial to other people, to me, that is education. Not necessarily formal education, but it is education.
Right.
And I read a book, and Carolyn probably maybe expressed this or will. I read a book a few years ago about a Dr. James Still. And the beautiful thing about him, he was a botanist himself. His dad was into botany. And as a kid at 3 years old, he understood plants and flowers and trees, but he always had this notion he wanted to become a doctor. He didn't know how he was going to do it, but he wound up becoming self-educated himself as a young man because his dad could not afford to send him to medical school. He happened to be in Germantown, Philadelphia, and he was looking for books. So he went into a bookstore. And obviously, you know, being a young Black man at that time, they tried to discourage him, say, look, there's no books in here for you. And so just so happened, it was a Quaker standing behind him. And he said to him, look, there's another bookstore you can go to and get all the books you want about medicine. So he sent them to another store. And lo and behold, that storekeeper said, you can have as many books you want with medicine as you can. So that's what he did. He bought books, he combined it with botany, and he became the first Black doctor in the state of New Jersey. And they called him the Doctor of the Pines because he was so good that he would cure people from all these different diseases that you talk about. And he didn't just put a Band-Aid over it. So the white patients would request him because the doctors they had were just filling them with medication and it was not going away. So he was actually curing the very things you talk about, you know, diabetes, high blood pressure, gout, whatever it was, he found a cure for it. And to this day, his foundation, his great-great-grandchildren run it in Medford, New Jersey. And in fact, he became the second largest landowner in Medford at the time, which was unheard of. So what you're saying, it really resonates, and it's the reason we're all on this particular call today. So I just wanted to share that with you as well. I mean, like I said, I could probably go on and on and on with what you talked about to kind of connect the dots, but I won't do that. I won't be selfish, as Ellie just said. There's other people on the call, but I want to commend you and say that was really a wonderful, wonderful thing that you are sharing now. And it does give people purpose, and we need to keep finding purposes because everybody has a skill set. We just got to tap into it.
Tap into it.
And share it.
Now, thank you, brother. And you tell you one of my earliest experiences, as I said, I had a civil service job working at the mental hospital the same month I graduated high school. Nice. I met two people, very nice people, a man and a woman. One was a doctor, one was a nurse. And they used to brag about how they never took a sick day. And they both retired a year after I met them. They both passed away a year within that retirement. And that was one of the first things I said to myself. I said, you have sick days for a reason.
Yes, you do.
Okay? Right. As my mama used to say, even iron wears out. You have to take rest. You have to rest yourself and pace yourself You know, I have people that I have to motivate, and I have people that I have to slow down.
Yeah.
And the ones I have to,
Right.
the ones I have to slow down is the ones that I have to say, pace yourself.
Yeah.
You know, one of the things that I try to get across with a living example, I had a record that I had to do that started on Monday and finished on Friday. I know how to pace myself.
All right, now,
Yes.
there you go. There you go. Well,
And
you know,
that's-
one gentleman told me in my life, he says, one day of worry is more exhausting than a week of work.
That's right.
So, yeah, like you said, you really have to pace yourself, and that's why we do it one day at a time. And I just add one other thing to that that William Still's story. He's the brother to James Still, who was part of the Underground Railroad in Philadelphia. When Harriet Tubman came into Philadelphia, they connected.
All right.
And those same connections are still in South Jersey, in Lawnside, Mount Laurel, Morristown, where the Underground Railroad traveled through the churches. And this is basically how they also were successful with that. So it all ties right in.
It all ties in.
You're right on point. And we all are really connected. We're just starting to realize that now.
That's right.
I just wanted to share that.
You know, Donald, Donald Burton, from you mentioning putting a Band-Aid on things.
Mm-hmm.
This afternoon, I'll be going to see my 90-year-old senior. And she said that she could rip her doctor's head off his shoulders. That's how angry she is, because she has a problem. She doesn't have any teeth right now.
Mm-hmm.
And so she can't eat like she wants to. I'm making her a pot of lima bean soup to take over there after we get off, and a tonic, because her gum is bleeding. She has infection, and they're compounding the antibiotics. They're putting things on top of things, and none of it's working. And we know that antibiotics break down the immune system.
Yes, they do.
And she can ill afford to have her immune system broken down. So, you know, a nice herbal remedy tonic with some yarrow in it and some plantain leaf and a few other herbs are going to help her with her anxiety and affecting healing for her. I added some blessed thistle too for the infection.
Awesome, Carolyn.
Mm-hmm. So
well, thank God for someone like you. I mean, you know, you permeate beyond boundaries. I mean, and this is something that is really, really nice.
Thank you. And Donald Thomas, my cousin Donald, I love doing house calls. And that's something that I always used to admire when I heard about doctors doing house calls. Right. And I just find it interesting that now I get to live that, you know, yes. Especially in caring for the senior community.
Yes.
Mm-hmm. So I have a slide here. Ask Dr. Thomas. And this question was nice. On my mind. In a time when COVID-19 is still lingering in our communities, could you please share with our community what healing modalities you use to address your respiratory issues?
Very good, very good. Well, as I said, in my research, one of the things that I found out was that dairy was what we would call contraindicated to various minority groups, Africans, Native Americans, Native Hawaiians. When I was teaching school in Brownsville, I'll never forget the food service guys said that they did a study to find out why was so much milk being thrown out in the schools in the Black and Hispanic neighborhoods, because the kids couldn't digest it. So that dairy is a form, that dairy does not break down, and that creates a lot of congestion and mucus.
A lot of mucus.
A lot of congestion and mucus. And so one of the first things you can do is really get off the dairy. That's something, and you can do your own test if you're breathing, because I would do it all the time. If you're breathing good and then you go and eat a cheese pizza, it can be a vegetarian
breathing good long.
If it's got that cheese on it,
within
a couple of hours, you're gonna see congestion. You're gonna see your nose stuff up, and so that's telling you right there to cut down and cut out that dairy.
And if your body's clean of it and you eat it, you're going to feel it within minutes. It's not even going to wait.
It's not going to wait. So that's one of the first things. And when I say dairy, not just the drinking of the milk, but then also things that they made with dairy in it.
Yes,
that's right.
That's going to
ice cream. Ice cream put me in bed for 48 hours one time before I understood that it was dairy doing it to me. I had gone to the sinus doctor. He was cauterizing my sinuses and everything. And finally, I just said, there's got to be a way. And I started doing research. And then I was also going to Queen Afua. She was the Brooklyn herbalist, and listening to her. And that's when I found out it's dairy and red meat. Red meat causes a lot of congestion. And when I was doing my colonics with her, the colon therapist explained that if you have a buildup of feces in the area of your intestine where the nerves connect to your sinuses, because our organs are represented just like in our hands, our ears, and our feet, they're represented in our intestines as well. And if that area is congested, you will have sinus issues. Or if it's congested in the head area, you'll have headaches.
So along with the dairy, reducing or eliminating the dairy, you also want to get into some form of breathing exercises. There are anything from, depending upon your level of fitness, you can first start off with simple breathing exercises where you're sitting in the chair and you're making sure that you breathe from the diaphragm into the lungs and you get full breaths. One of the things I wrote about years ago was that many people in the modern world, their lung capacity is only a half of what it could be because they're shallow breathers. I have a very close friend, still smokes cigarettes. I don't think he has breathed through his nose in 20 years because he's stuffed up all the time. And I love him like a brother. We've been friends since we were 4 and 6 years of age, and he came with me to Hawaii. So he stands with me, but I'm saying the point is you have to do things that increase lung capacity. As far as respiratory issues, even though if you live in a home that has a lot of carpets and drapes, you have to try to make sure that you can vacuum those carpets and drapes. If you can remove the drapes, because that holds a lot of dust. I had to get rid of
my carpets. I can't even use carpet.
Yeah, that holds a lot of dust. Yeah, and all of that.
I'm allergic to dust, and I know that.
Exactly.
And I can always tell if I'm in a dusty environment, I can't stay there long because I start to feel the effects. And that's that reason I don't have carpet nowhere in my home. I get everything is wood floors and lots of plants. So you make a very good point.
Yeah. So you're dealing with that dust issue. If you live in an older apartment building, there's a certain amount of paint chips that's falling and other things that's falling from the ceiling all the time. If you're just like you're in the sun right now, if you're in your apartment and you just look at the sun rays and you see little particles in there, you're breathing that.
Yes, you are. Yes, you are, which is crazy. It's scary when you think about it, but you're absolutely right.
You're breathing that. You're breathing that. So those are the sorts of things that you want to strengthen your lungs. You want to get rid of many of the irritants that's affecting you. You know, I was just saying to people, and I know they teach this in school. If you're a barber, hairstylist, you're supposed to be wearing a mask all the time because every time they cut, you're breathing you're breathing pieces of hair. And the chemicals, but you're breathing hair. Literally, you're breathing little pieces of hair. Wow. You know, the chemicals you're breathing. If you work in any kind of automotive place, you need to wear a mask because you're breathing all that you're breathing all of those fumes on a daily basis. So you don't realize how much junk you're breathing.
Environmental toxins.
Yes. And those are the things, that's why at least in your apartment or in your home, if you can get some form of air filters, air filtration, especially in your bedroom or wherever you spend the most time, those are things that will help to eliminate all of those external irritants to your body. And then, of course, as we said, the milk is something that's going to congest you. Of course, the meats are going to congest you. You want to definitely try to stay away from the processed meats.
Yes.
The bologna, the frankfurters, and all of those sort of stuff.
And sugar, too much sugar.
I mean, you know, here's the thing. You could go down the list of all of the things that are bad.
Yes.
What you have to do is kind of make a broad list and then start on which ones do you think you can realistically start eliminating today, and get strong on that and keep getting stronger from there.
And have a list that you're going to replace each thing you remove
That's
with.
right. That's right.
Yeah.
That's right.
Now, I got a question.
Go ahead. Yes.
I had a question for you, Donald. You touched on sugar. Now, I used a substitute just recently. I started maybe about a month ago called monk fruit.
Yeah, monk fruit. Yes.
Are you familiar with monk fruit?
Yes. Yes.
And how would you say monk fruit in relation to substituting it for sugar? Because I read somewhere where the monks used to use it back in ancient times. So I don't know.
That's why they call it monk fruit.
That's why they call it monk fruit.
The bottom line is that your fruit sugars, the sugar within the fruit itself is a good form of sugar. There'll be many people who will speak against you just drinking a lot of fruit juices because it has no fiber. And so that's going to kind of raise your blood sugar very quickly.
Correct.
The monk fruit is a very good fruit, but just like honey, even you use it in small quantities. See, and that's the thing. It's like so many things.
Moderation.
You know, the monk fruit would be good if you're using it in a small quantity. The honey is good if you're using it in small quantities. If you start using a lot of it, then you're not doing any more for yourself than if you were eating sugar, because it's going to process in your body just like sugar. As many teas as I drink, I tried to get into the habit of not drinking tea with honey. I've been doing that for quite some time now. But then you have stevia.
Right.
But you have, you know, even with that, you take it slow. There is another Chinese herb called jiao gulan or gynostema. They found that the people in certain parts of China who use that particular herb, they looked upon it as a poor man's ginseng. It gave, and it has a naturally kind of a sweet taste. So that's something that I have added to whatever other teas I'm drinking. I add a little bit of that to it. And, you know, shameless plug, these are, I mention all of these things in my book, New York Swing. And the idea is that even if, I don't care if even if you're an athlete, you know, I always used to tell people as far as the look of people, Hank Aaron was the home run champion. He was not a big man. Okay, Hank Aaron was not this big man. Okay, everybody after Hank Aaron that broke their home run record, they're suspect as far as what kind of drugs they were taking.
That's true.
Okay? And so they're all suspect. Barry Bonds and you name them, they're all suspect. My point is that when you are tapping into your natural talents and abilities, you don't have to overdo any of these things. You work with your body's natural abilities. I mean, you know, Michael Jordan played a game with the flu, okay? Okay, because of his natural ability. And he was a junk food junkie at the time before he got married. But I just say that to say that's not to say that the junk was good. That's to say when you are tapped into your natural talents and abilities, that's what you first draw upon. And, you know, you start with pure water can help you and help your body, because the first thing you're trying to do is build up your natural immunity, your natural strength and health. I always talk about
people don't drink enough water.
You don't drink enough water. You look at the farmers before industrialization. A farmer was not a big man or big woman, yet they're lifting bales of hay and everything else. And I'm saying that to say that nowadays people think that you have to get on some kind of drug to have that strength and so on. But look at all of the people who did farm work, one man behind a mule, and he's back and forth down those roads. They call that aerobics nowadays.
How about that? How about that?
You know, so the point is that focus upon your natural strengths and abilities. This is where it's good. I don't care how old you are, you start looking at what are my natural strengths, my natural talents. Also look at some of your natural weaknesses. You know, I didn't give myself the knee disease. It came upon me. As a child, I had the bronchitis and then the sinusitis.
Yeah, I had that when I was a kid.
Yeah, I didn't give it to me, but I had it. It's in me. And so the first thing I had to do is identify my weaknesses and then see how I could strengthen myself. And not just jump to whatever's the latest this or the latest that, but really look and always know yourself. You know, I had somebody laugh, and I was talking to a prospective publisher one time, and I said, I was doing a book on physical fitness for people over 60, and they laughed. I said, well, you know, people over 60 need physical fitness also. But everything that you're seeing on TV, you're not going to do that CrossFit and all that sort of stuff when you
I'm
get
afraid not.
Yeah. You know,
so you have to know yourself, know your limitations, know your strengths. Again, my mother and father were chain smokers. One day they just put it down and never picked up another cigarette again. That was a very strong example to me on what I could do when it comes to nutrition or health, because I saw my parents, they didn't preach, oh, cigarettes are bad or whatever. They knew it was bad. I say my mother used to smoke Lark cigarettes. I forget what kind my father smoked. Both of them, one day they put it down. And, you know, example is always very good, especially for young people, to see it for themselves. So that's, you know, I really say to people, identify your strengths, identify your weaknesses, accept your weaknesses as something that you need to work on. Don't beat yourself up, but work on it in some way every day.
Yes.
Nice.
You know, as you mentioned, smoking, I used to come home and beg my mother to stop smoking. And what it taught me as an herbalist today is you can only share the information with someone. You can't make them do it. And she continued to smoke, and emphysema actually took her out after 20 years of smoking. But it is a personal choice. Health is a personal choice. And you have to decide when you want to stop suffering.
A lady made a statement one time in a meeting. It wasn't in church, but I'll never forget it. She said, salvation is for everyone. Not everyone is willing to live a life of salvation.
That's right.
End of story. Not everyone is willing to do what needs to be done.
That's true.
Okay. And that's what it comes down to. You can have all of the example in the world. Until that individual is ready to make the change, it's not going to happen.
It's not going to happen.
And they may not make the change. You know,
they might not make it.
My grandmother lived to 90, and I didn't know her as a kid. I met her later in my life. And I sat down with her, and she had a Coca-Cola on the table, and she had her ashtray and her cigarettes. And she was well into her late 80s, and she basically said, this is what I enjoy doing, and I'm gonna do it to the day I die. She's not gonna change it. She knew it wasn't good for her. But who am I to question her if she had a long life of longevity?
Okay, but that also happens as a result of the constitution of a person. She had a strong constitution. Sure. Someone else doing the same thing might die at 30. You know what I mean? So it really depends on the person. I know people sometimes say, well, I got to die of something. Well, I'd rather not die wheezing and having people having to do things.
Take care of you.
I mean, if I could have a choice,
right?
I would rather be kicking my heels in the sun somewhere, doing something I like doing.
That's right.
You know?
I'm for that one. I would love that too. To go peacefully.
Go to sleep one night and that's it.
There it is.
And the point is, as there's a very famous question in the book of Ecclesiastes: why should you die before your time?
Okay, like that.
And this is one of the things I go back to: minority health disparities. African Americans have one of the shortest life expectancies and lifespan.
That is correct.
Why should you die before your time?
It's bad enough we don't know when that'll be, but then you don't have to put your foot on the accelerator.
Right. And not only don't you know what it's going to be, but in America, the average person or the average white person lives to their late 70s. A Black person lives a good 7 to 8 years less than that. Okay?
That's true.
Heart disease comes upon African Americans almost 10 to 15 years before it comes upon Caucasians. before COVID-19 ever existed, there was a saying, when white people sneeze, black people get the flu.
Wow.
Okay, which
And
means
you know, the other thing is, what about the life that you live, the quality of the life
quality.
before you die?
Quality.
You've stolen those years too.
But that's why I said, not only do I have to convince them that they can live a long life, I have to convince them that life is worth living.
That's right.
what I said.
And that's probably the biggest challenge of
That's
all.
the challenge. That's the challenge.
That's the challenge of all.
You talking to somebody who lives in poverty or someone who has never had any success in their life, and you're trying to tell them, can you live to be 90? Why?
Yeah, right. Why? Give me a
Why?
good reason why.
Give me a reason why. That's it. You know.
Yeah, that is the challenge.
You know, that is a real reality. I have a lot of seniors that are well into their late 70s, 80s, 90s. But I find the ones that are struggling the most are the younger ones.
Yeah.
If their quality of life is limited, if they are in poverty, because it's depressing, you know, and of course we all know we just came out of COVID, which just added more to it.
Yeah.
But you make a very good point. How do you convince someone to continue living? And if you had to live in those same circumstances, would you be an advocate?
That's right.
I mean, you may feel the same way.
That's right.
But what people don't realize is that you can find hope with herbs. But first you have to convince people to take the herbs, because there are herbs that address mental illness, mental health, the soul issues. There are herbs for all of that.
All of it.
You know, before we go any further, I want to make sure that you get to speak to your other cousin, Donald. Dolores, could you unmute yourself and say hi to your cousin, please?
Well, hello, cousin Donald. Can you hear me?
Hey, my dear, how you feeling?
I'm doing well. I enjoyed your presentation. I really liked seeing your mother and your father and your uncles and everybody. And okay, I got some more people out there.
Yeah, that's our people.
Yeah.
Yes, well, as I said, you know, it's just one of those things that our people have come a long way.
Right.
And they've tried and some things worked and some things didn't work, but you never give up.
Yeah, that's true.
You know? That's the one thing I can say about all of the family. They never gave up.
No.
I had a cousin that made it. I said to my cousin one time, I said, you know, I can't remember anybody in the family that went to jail. And he laughed and he said, that's because they knew if the family had to get the money together to get them out of jail, they'd get in jail until it was time. So we didn't come up with
we
money.
don't subscribe to that too much.
They kept their nose clean because they know nobody in the family could get that money.
They'll be sitting in there.
Well, for me, my dad told me, I'm not coming to get you. I'm not letting your mama come get you neither. Like, well, dang.
That's right. That's right. But you see, that's the point. That was something that was held over us as young people to keep ourselves relatively straight.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah.
You see,
Mhm.
that was that we didn't forget that. Okay,
No.
you didn't forget that. They said if
Sure
you get in
didn't.
trouble, you know that you was raised in a certain way. I didn't teach you to go out there and steal. I
Yeah.
didn't teach you to go out there and commit crime. If you do it, that's on you, because I'm not going to get you.
Yeah. And I'm not gonna let your mama come get you neither.
That's right. That's right. Because you knew better. You knew
Yeah.
better, and you may not have been rich, but you never had to want for the basic things.
Right.
If you went out there and committed crime, it wasn't because of what you were taught in your home, because you was taught the exact opposite in your home.
That's right. That's
You
right.
know, and that was something, you know, and that was something that stuck with most of us.
Mhm.
You know, that's why I say I couldn't think of anybody in the family that went to jail.
That's so beautiful seeing you two communicate.
Yeah.
I'm blessed to be able to make that happen. To continue on the conversation, thank you, Dolores. With respiratory health, I just wanted to throw a few herbs and tinctures at you to think about, because Dr. Seavey said mucus is the cause of every disease. Eliminate the mucus and you eliminate the disease. And he also promoted the adoption of an alkaline diet. So asafoetida, which it has a terrible odor, but it works. I had a bronchial issue some years ago, and a friend of mine told me about it. I tried it and it wiped it right out. It was also mentioned in the slave narrative. And I spoke to Tracy, you know, Donald Burton, Tracy, who was you met the other day. She said that it can be obtained in a capsule with other herbs. So that would take down the smell and the taste.
Yeah.
That's something for you to think of. Mullein, echinacea. Mullein is very good. If it breaks a fever, and it also it helps you expel the mucus. Echinacea, you always hear about eucalyptus. Plantain leaf is not only good for respiratory health, it's good for wound healing. You can make poultices for inflammation and everything. Lungwort, peppermint, golden seal, all-time favorite. And I'd like to mention that golden seal can also be used for joint pain. I never knew that. I learned that from Matthew Wood. And of course, garlic. At some point, I felt a sore throat coming on, and I just took a clove of garlic and bit down in it. It takes a lot of courage, I know, but I did it. Yeah, and within minutes, the sore throat was gone. So at least it was a quick fix. You know, it wasn't months of antibiotics. On the picture that you had of your mentor, Donald,
Yes.
I wanted to highlight this statement that was at the bottom of the photo.
Yes,
It
thank
said, the
you.
mediocre teacher tells, the good teacher explains, the superior teacher demonstrates, and the great teacher inspires. That's by William Arthur Ward. And I wanted to highlight it, Donald, to let you know you are all of that and more. I really am so inspired every time I get the chance to speak to you. And, you know, it's such a privilege that you would allow me to be a part of your family energy, you know? So as you see, folks, you can go to Donald's website, newjumpswing.com. His telephone number is 808-345-6538. Email is pdnman@hawaii.rr.com. And his address, you can reach him, PDN Publishing and Health Products, Post Office Box 1442 in Pahoa, Hawaii, 96778. And boy, does that scenery make me want to jump on a plane. I want to thank all of you for coming. And I really enjoyed everyone, you know. And if you have anything else to say before we close, please feel free to chime in now. Idell, you're unusually quiet. I don't even know. I don't even understand.
I don't know why you don't understand. I'm listening to these two Donald T, Donald B. It's so interesting. You know, I've been brought up in church, and in church you listen. You don't turn your head. You don't turn your head. You don't move. You listen. In the Pentecostal church, we sat for 3 hours and we listen. So I don't. You know, I don't talk that much anyway. You know, I don't talk.
Don't make me reveal you on camera.
Donald,
we'll talk about that later.
Thank you for your information. I know you got more, but I'll get your book. I'll order your book. I get the information from Carol and order your book. I enjoy listening to. If you have a video or whatever, but now you understand. I like to listen. I like to learn. Thank you for allowing me to share.
There are two people from my childhood that I really don't try to get off, Carol. I saw you put thank you. Come say hi to my cousin. And Blanche, say hi to my cousin, because it's important to me that he gets to feel and experience the people who have helped shape me. Carol, I've known her since elementary school, Donald.
Beautiful, beautiful.
Hi, Donald.
Aloha.
And Donald, your birthday is the same day as my birthday.
Oh, really? Oh,
Wow.
then you are
September
on
21st.
target then.
What is it?
Right.
What is that?
September 21st.
September
Ah.
21.
I'm
Yeah.
born September 7th also. I'm in
Oh,
the same
Virgo's in the
All these
house.
Virgos, huh?
On September, I'm September 27th.
Wow.
Okay, Libra. Okay.
Wow. I'm
Wow.
surrounded by these lovely Libras.
How
I was
about
going to say very quickly, along with the herbs that you mentioned, also you can get into the habit of including red pepper into your diet.
Yes.
African red
Oh,
pepper will help
yes.
I
break
love
up
some
that
pepper.
congestion. Yeah, so you can use that. They used to tease us about hot sauce, but the hot sauce is really red pepper and vinegar. And those are things that can certainly use that will help with congestion.
Oh,
Right. Yes. How about that?
yes. And Blanche, I don't know where you are, but
I'm right here.
Okay, say hi to
I'm
Donald.
lying down today. That's why I don't want anybody to see me.
Okay, that's
I'm
fine.
resting.
But
All right.
talk to Donald. You could talk.
Well,
later.
Donald, I really enjoyed it. You really took me back to my childhood also. Leaving the concrete jungle of Bed-Stuy, Brooklyn.
Okay.
And I used to think, I would go to school out in Sheepshead Bay and I hear people talking about where they went on vacation. And, mine was the same thing, going down south every year,
Right.
And coming to family that had farms, getting on the donkey and stuck in the middle of the field and call cousin Andrew to come and get us. And like you were saying, everything was fresh. Everything, even the meat was fresh. It wasn't.
That's right.
I remember telling my mother, I said, "Ma, that chicken is bad." She said, "Hun, you just don't know what fresh smells
That's right.
like. It's not bad, And she was a forager. I don't care where you were. She could walk around and pick a leaf. I remember being little. She pinch something, put it in your mouth. She might chew it up or whatever and give to you and tell you what it's for. She grew up an orphan, actually living in the streets and with her brother. And she was the nurse. She said she took care of everybody. She said she pierced ears and nobody got infections. And they ate off the land and healed. She became a nurse later on in life. I remember we would go to the doctor and call her and say, "Ma, they want to do this or give me this." "No, get out of there." Don't, she hated Western medicine.
Get thee behind me.
Don't you let them do that, and we would always call her first, And I remember those tenures in her making stuff. Here, take this. I remember my skin was losing color. And she took the pennies, back in the day, they used to be all copper, and put them in vinegar. And it turned into this nasty slime. And I remember her putting that on me. And I only had one little spot. I had it coming down my face, my arms, and my oldest daughter, the same thing. And I remembered those pennies.
Wow.
And I did the same thing. I sure did. And I remember a lot of those, And I have a lot of health problems. But one thing, years ago, because I used to be 335 pounds. I didn't have high blood pressure. I didn't have diabetes, no heart, nothing. And the doctor I had said something. He said, "What was your diet like growing up?" I said, "Well, my mother and father from the South." I said, "Anything that's junk food or processed in the garden." I used to want bologna sandwiches. No, we had sliced ham, real turkey meat slice. I didn't realize that was better. And he said that he found that people who grew up with a good diet, and you look at these children now in a good diet, he said, their heart. He said, if you think about it, all those organs, what were they grown with? No different than where you plant a seed.
Wow.
Right.
Wow.
And he said that he started asking his patients that, like at that size, you would think I would have high blood pressure, diabetes, all of these things. And he said a lot has to do with, because y'all were talking about different people could do different things and not get sick. He said, what were those organs built on? What were those lungs, that pancreas, that heart? So even for our children, because like I said, we couldn't eat junk food at all. You know, and you didn't go out to eat unless it was a graduation.
That's right.
We didn't go to restaurants.
That's true. We ate home all the time.
You ate home all the time. They used to come to the South and bring these big coolers. And remember, I'm 65. I remember back then, remember the truck would come through with fresh fruits and vegetables from the South.
Blanche, Chicken Avenue.
Yes, indeed.
Yeah.
You remember, right? Everybody, right?
Yep.
Right.
Yep.
The
Right.
wagons.
And even the meat we ate.
That's right.
We had a big
And we
freezer.
went
They
to the
would come
chicken
down and get
house.
fresh.
Right. We went to the chicken house.
Right.
And had the fresh chickens killed. Oh, I couldn't stand the smell of that place, but I like that chicken though.
The best chicken you ever had.
That's right.
And our sausage wasn't processed, because I remember they would come down, they said, oh, certain season, they slaughtering the hogs now. So see, our pork didn't come on sausage. It didn't have nitrates. It didn't have all that stuff.
All of
Our
that stuff.
proteins was so much better.
That's
right. That's right.
Yep.
You
I was
know,
telling
so
somebody the other, I'm sorry. I was telling somebody the other day.
thank you for taking me back. I loved it.
You're very welcome. You see, even alcohol, if you distill your own liquor, it's clear.
That's
you go
right.
into the liquor store and Johnny Walker is black, blue, and red. How do you think he got those colors? That's all chemical.
Yeah. My Uncle Johnny had moonshine in Georgia.
That's right. That's
he
right.
make his own moonshine. It was all clear.
That's pure stuff. Now you can't drink
Go
too much
down in
of
the
it.
basement with the old men. The old men had all the moonshine stashed
That's
away.
right.
But
the point is that no chemical. There's no
No
chemical.
chemical.
In that.
And you know, even because I'm a smoker, I had to recently stop smoking. The doctors were telling me. And then the doctor said, he said, you know, Miss Foy, he said, it's not the nicotine or the leaf. He said, it's the chemicals
In there, the poisons, right?
in it.
Yep.
Because if he's, and I know they have those cigarettes now, nature where it's just tobacco. That's it. He said the chemical, he said, I prefer for you to smoke a joint than a cigarette. He said, because there's no chemicals in it.
Right.
He said, if you want
Until
to,
they started lacing marijuana with chemicals.
Oh yeah, well if
of
they're
course
growing it, yeah, you
if
got
you
paraquat.
get it, yeah, because as soon as they start processing it, they add chemical. They got to make it better. They got to make it. They have to.
They want you to get hooked. They want you to get hooked.
Yeah.
I worked in a mental hospital, and this is going back years ago, where they actually allowed the patients to smoke cigarettes, and the only cigarettes that they allowed them to have was Cayuga tobacco, and they rolled it themselves. And I asked the doctor why. He said because any manufactured cigarette, as soon as you light it and put it in the ashtray, it's going to burn on its own. Whereas that natural cigarette, if they light that and they forget it, it goes out. And that's why they felt it was safer because it wasn't treated with chemicals to make it burn, whether you smoke it or not.
Was that Cayuga cigarette? Was it an Indian cigarette?
Yeah, that's our American pride, to see a Native American head on the face of an American pride cigarette.
Yeah, I'm familiar.
They make those now. They're very expensive. Of course, they make it to where you can't afford it, but they have just plain tobacco cigarettes now that yeah, but that's what he said, it's not nicotine. He said people think it's the nicotine and the smoking. He said no, it's the chemicals.
It's the chemicals. Well, it's a little bit of everything.
It's a little bit of everything.
Yeah, but you know what I'm saying. What's really gonna get you.
Yeah. So you know what, folks? I'm sitting here and Miss Betty's waiting for her lima beans.
All right.
And
now,
we can't have that.
no, we cannot.
Bye.
Counting on that. So we gonna
I
let you go.
love you all. Donald, thank you so much for sharing with us today.
Yes.
My
Thank
pleasure.
you,
My pleasure.
Carol, for coming.
Thank you all.
Dolores, Blanche, Donald, Burton.
Thank you. It's good
Thank
to be
you.
back. I enjoyed this.
Yes.
Mhm.
And let's be in touch, okay?
Yes,
Will do.
definitely.
Before you go, I just want to say,
Mwah.
Yes.
Idell, a
Thank you
gentleman
so
told me
much.
years ago, you got 2 ears, 2 eyes, and 1 mouth. So you're still with your ears and your eyes, never with your hands. But you're right about the listening factor. That's important for all of us. And I definitely listen as well. So thank you for having us. Thank you.
Yes,
Thank
absolutely.
you.
Thank you, Carolyn.
Idell likes to get on. I'm gonna get her when I see her next week. Take care. Love you.
Aloha,
Bye-bye.
everyone.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Blessed day and a blessed weekend.
You too.
You too.
Save the date for the Healing Project Wellness Series. And we'll be covering a variety of topics as always. And we're looking forward to seeing you at that time. As we always say, you must change because life is all about change. And you're going to change whether you want to or not. In every moment, we're losing cells and we're gaining cells throughout our body. Let's make them healthy cells.
Right, like that.
Today's meditation is, I am bountiful. I am beautiful. I am my ancestors' harvest. I am.
I like that.
That is nice. Very nice. Okay.
Thank you for coming.
Thank you for having us.
Yes, thank you, Carolyn. And it was a pleasure to meet you, Donald.
Likewise, Tracy. Likewise. And one day maybe I get up to Wyoming one day. You know, you don't want
That'd be
one of the
wonderful.
horses out there.